Every animal with a backbone needs two parents to reproduce. Some sharks quietly stopped obeying that rule. In an aquarium with no male for years, a female gave birth to a pup carrying only her own genes. And for a while, no one could explain how. The keepers checked the tank records twice. No male shark had touched that water in over 3 years. Sperm cannot survive that long. There was no donor, no contact, no mistake in the logbook. And yet there was a pup, alive, swimming, real. The first instinct was the obvious one. Someone got the records wrong, or the female had stored sperm from an old mate, the way some sharks can. That explanation felt safe. It was also wrong. What the genetics eventually showed was stranger than a hidden mate, and it forced biologists to admit that one of the oldest rules they taught about animals with spines had a quiet exception swimming in plain sight. Stay with me. The part they leave out is not that a shark gave birth alone. It is what that pup was made of. Because this is not a story about one odd tank. It is about a strategy that has now turned up in shark after shark, in aquarium after aquarium, hiding behind the simple assumption that it could not happen. Start with how shark reproduction is supposed to work, because for over 400 million years it has worked exactly one way. A shark is a vertebrate, and like nearly every vertebrate, it builds its young from two sets of genes, half from a mother, half from a father. Male sharks carry a pair of organs called claspers, used to deliver sperm directly to the female. Fertilization happens inside her. Depending on the species, she then lays leathery egg cases or gives live birth. The bonnethead, a small, shovel-headed cousin of the hammerhead found along American coasts, does it this way. So does the zebra shark, the blacktip, the bamboo shark. Two parents. Mixed genes. No shortcuts. This is the deal sexual reproduction strikes. You pay the cost of finding a mate, and in return your offspring get a fresh shuffle of genes every generation, which helps a species adapt and survive. It is the default setting for animals with backbones, drilled into every biology class. And what happens by the end of this story is the part no one expects, because at least 4 kinds of shark have now been caught breaking that deal, and one of them broke it after doing everything the textbook way first. But to see why that matters, you first have to see just how locked in the old rule really was. Here is how locked in it was. When the first impossible pup appeared, biologists did not even seriously consider that it had no father. They reached for a known trick instead. Female sharks of many species can store a male's sperm inside their bodies for months, sometimes more than a year, releasing it to fertilize eggs long after mating. A female caught alone could simply be carrying a long-dead suitor's contribution. That is the detail that will matter most, so hold on to it. Sperm storage was the obvious answer, and it had ruled out parthenogenesis, reproduction from an unfertilized egg, in every prior case. Because asexual birth in a shark should not be possible. Sharks are not aphids or lizards built for it. They are large, slow-growing, long-lived predators that invest heavily in only a few offspring. Evolution had no obvious reason to leave them a backdoor. So when a bonnethead at an Omaha zoo gave birth in 2001 after 3 years with no male, the safe money was on stored sperm or a missed mating. The pup even died within days, stung by a stingray in the same tank, which nearly closed the case before it opened. But a tiny sample of that pup's tissue was kept. And 6 years later, that sample said something no one was ready to hear. A shark pup can be built from a single parent, and in 2007, the DNA finally proved it. When researchers analyzed that preserved bonnethead tissue, they were testing for a father's genetic signature, the leftover proof of stored sperm everyone expected to find. It was not there. The pup carried no paternal DNA at all. None. Except that is not the strangest part of what the bonnethead was actually doing. The genetic markers showed the pup was not even a simple copy of its mother. It was something more extreme, built from her genes alone, but reshuffled into a near-identical, stripped-down version of her. This is parthenogenesis, an egg developing into a full animal with no sperm involved. The question the keepers had asked for years, how a female with no mate produced a living pup, finally had an answer no one had been willing to write down. The egg had essentially fertilized itself. A cell that should have been discarded during egg formation, a tiny sister cell called a polar body, had stepped in and played the role of the missing sperm. The result was a pup with only its mother's DNA, but with far less of the genetic variety two parents would have given it. Not a clone in the cartoon sense. Something rarer. And once biologists knew what to look for, they started finding it everywhere. Once parthenogenesis was on the table, the old cases stopped looking like flukes. In 2008, a blacktip shark at a Virginia aquarium, kept 8 years with no male, was found carrying a pup with no father's DNA. White-spotted bamboo sharks did it too, in tank after tank. Each one had been quietly logged and quietly explained away. Then came the case that broke the framing entirely. At an aquarium in Australia, a zebra shark named Leonie had spent years with a male and produced pups the normal, two-parent way. In 2012, her mate was moved out. She lived alone. And in 2016, with no male anywhere near her, she laid eggs that hatched into healthy pups. DNA confirmed those pups carried only Leonie's genes. This was the detail the old story simply could not absorb. Parthenogenesis was supposed to be a last-ditch act by a female who had never had a mate, a desperate roll of the dice. Leonie had a mate. She had used him. Then, with no male in reach, she changed strategy and reproduced from herself. The backdoor was not an emergency hatch for the mateless. It was a switch a normal, previously sexual female could flip when the alternative was no offspring at all. Evidence like this had been sitting in aquarium logbooks for years, dismissed as record-keeping errors, until the genetics forced everyone to look again. Sharks have probably been giving birth without any male for millions of years, and the open ocean hid it from us. Parthenogenesis leaves no obvious trace in the wild. A female swims off, produces a pup, and unless you sequence that pup's DNA, you would simply assume it had a father somewhere out in the dark. The trick only surfaced because aquariums isolate single females and keep meticulous records. They accidentally built the perfect trap to catch a behavior the sea conceals. But there is a harder reason the old framing held, and it is the part no one likes to say out loud. These pups pay a price. With genes from only one parent, they are far less genetically diverse than normal offspring, sometimes so inbred that survival rates drop. For a long time, scientists assumed any animal producing such fragile young could only be doing it by accident, never as a real plan. So a repeatable strategy got filed under mistake. And here is the uncomfortable edge. Researchers are now spotting parthenogenesis in wild and stressed populations, including species where females are running low on mates. A shark giving virgin birth may not be a curiosity at all. It may be a smoke alarm, a sign that males have grown so scarce that females are reproducing the only way left to them. We tell ourselves that life needs partners, that a new animal is always a negotiation between two histories. A shark, alone in the dark, quietly proves the rule was never as fixed as we taught it. The question is no longer whether a vertebrate can make life entirely by itself. It is how many already do, out there, unwitnessed, while we keep insisting it cannot happen.